Alrighty, my clock shows 7 o'clock, so I call to order the July 18th, 2022 meeting of the Tigard Planning Commission. Doreen, can we please have a roll call?
Yes. Vice President Jackson?
Present.
Commissioner Hu? President Hu? Commissioner Brandt?
Present.
Commissioner Miranda? Commissioner Roberts?
Present.
Commissioner K7?
Present.
Commissioner Watson?
Present.
Commissioner Shuck? Okay.
Thanks, Doreen. Next, I will ask if commissioners have any external communications they wish to share. If you do, please raise your digital hand. I see none. I do have two quick things to mention. One is the Washington County Board of Commissioners is looking at allocating some transportation funding, and right now they're soliciting community feedback. So I would recommend anyone with any interest or opinions on the matter to take a look. You can reach it through the City of Tigard website. If you go to the site, go to news, and then there's like a big button that says complete Greenberg. That will take you to the survey page. The other thing I wanted to mention briefly is Commissioner Hu, or President Hu, has been leading up some efforts to consider additional opportunities for further commissioner training and just, we can always be improving our skills and knowledge regarding the work we do here. So we should be hearing some more about that next time. I think he's reached out to a few of you individually, possibly, but just have that in mind. And if you have any thoughts or opinions on additional opportunities for that kind of thing, please be preparing that. Next on the agenda, earlier today, I believe Doreen sent out the minutes from our last meeting. Hopefully everyone got a chance to look at those. Are there any additions, deletions, edits, any sort of corrections that any commissioners wish to make? If so, please raise your digital hand. I see none, so I will declare that approved as presented. And next, we move on to our main event of the evening. We have a briefing on the Tigard Home Urban Agriculture Update.
So I will jump in here if you don't mind. For the public, I'm Tom McGuire, the Assistant Community Development Director. It's a little unusual to have public comments allowed at a briefing, but we have a lot of interest in this topic. So we did reach out to some folks who've been expressing a lot of interest in this topic and let them know that they could provide some commentary to the commission. And I think it's best to do it after the briefing. So I think you should do your briefing, and then after the briefing, we can open it up for commentary. We haven't talked about a time limit. I think that, reasonable amount of time, but I will leave that up to the discretion of the commission.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh dear, here we go. Okay. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission and Vice President Jackson. My name is Hope Pollard. I'm an associate planner with the Community Development Department. I'm here with Assistant Community Development Director Tom McGuire to talk to you tonight about urban agriculture regulations. I want to preface this by saying we're not asking for any sort of official vote tonight, but we are here to provide an introduction on some of the initial community outreach discussions we've been having and have a conversation with you all about how we should move forward. To give a little background, a little reminder, urban agriculture is what we're considering phase 1 of the Tigard Home project. So once again, HOME stands for housing, opportunity, mobility, and ease. Its primary goal is to allow for complete residential communities that maximize opportunity for community members while mitigating potential nuisances and hazards. At our last joint briefing with the Commission and City Council, we were directed to fast track the urban agriculture component of this project due to the immense amount of public interest. Since then, we've been researching existing ordinances from neighboring cities, and we held an outreach event with the Tigard community to receive their input. So we're here tonight to talk to you about what we've learned so far. So like I mentioned, the city has received significant public comment in the recent years about urban agriculture in Tigard. Feedback falls into apparently 2 opposing categories. So there's one that calls for a protection against pests, and the endangered public health associated with some urban farms. And 2 calls for protection and expansion of the sense of community, education, and economic opportunity that urban farms provide. So while these comments appear on the surface to demonstrate conflicting desires, we see a common goal that can be deduced, which is a clean, safe neighborhood built on a sense of community and opportunity. So on June 29th, we provided a forum where community members could come together to learn about local ordinances, speak with each other, and share their opinions, concerns, and preferences with the city. The event was structured like an open house where folks could interact with 4 different stations. I'll introduce these stations and the feedback we received at each of these stations in the following slides. At each of these stations, I also included each of them as a separate attachment in the staff report that was included with the agenda tonight. So I'll ask you all to follow along there as well if you're so inclined. I also have some pie chart visual representations of some of this data that we gathered from this feedback, and I can go through those separately after the official presentation if you guys have any additional questions. In advance of the June 29th meeting, we'd researched similarly sized or suburban cities throughout Oregon, but also Portland, and we looked at their ordinances on urban agriculture and livestock. We took a look at Portland, Eugene, Beaverton, Salem, Gresham, Hillsborough, and Springfield. If you reference attachment 4 in your packet, you can follow along and see in detail how these cities regulate different animals and how community members interacted with their regulations at the June 29th event. This board that you see here was Station 1. We provided a chart showing how many of each type of animal is allowed in different similarly sized cities throughout Oregon. Community members were welcomed to interact with this board by using star stickers to denote which regulations they liked and adding sticky notes for items that needed clarification. Many cities have different levels of restrictions based on lot size, often allowing 2 to 3 of each animal type on smaller lots, while allowing more animals based on square footage per animal for larger lots. These were the most popular types of regulations with the community, those that based restrictions based on number of square feet per animal, rather than regulations that had a singular maximum limit regardless of lot size. So for example, if we look to the very first column at Portland's regulations for chickens, poultry, and rabbits, and you can't see it super clearly in this image, but again, if you reference that attachment, you can see in much more greater detail Portland's regulations. So it would be that very first box in the first column. Portland limits chickens and other poultry and rabbits to 4 of each type of animal on small lots of less than 10,000 square feet, allows 6 of each animal on medium-sized lots of 10 to 20,000 square feet, and has no maximum for lots over 20,000. So a lot of the attendees really liked these regulations the best. And they also liked Portland's regulations on goats, with 3 to 5 goats maximum on small lots and no maximum on medium or large lots, as long as the property owner has a permit. In general, attendees liked regulations that required a permit for larger numbers of animals, and everyone agreed on no roosters. We also looked at regulations for other animals and bees, which people didn't comment too much on here, but had more thoughts on at the next station. And that next station was where attendees could basically write regulations of their own. So if you look at attachment 5 of your staff report, you can follow along with station 2. So here, after they got a sense of how different cities actually regulate animals elsewhere, they could now come here and write how many of each animal they think should be allowed here in Tigard. And this way they could get really specific. Apologies for my dog, he'll stop in a minute. So once again, they could write their own on a Post-it, or they could express approval of other people's ideas by putting a star sticker or a yes sticker. For chickens, other poultry, and goats, folks preferred lower numbers, which reflected the small or medium lot size regulations they interacted with at the previous station. The numbers shared here reflect verbal testimony from the event that we heard as well, indicating that attendees view Tigard as primarily a city of smaller and medium-sized lots. At the station, people also expressed more opinions on larger livestock, pigs, and bees. They generally preferred to prohibit or limit larger livestock, pigs, and sheep, considering Tigard's lots too small, and were generally open to larger amounts of bees. If you open up attachment 6, you can follow along with station 3, where attendees shared what kinds of urban agricultural activity they like for their neighborhood. And once again, they could support each other's ideas with yes stickers. Comments generally supported requiring or encouraging permitting, education, and community for local urban farmers. They also noted the educational and community building benefits of having urban agriculture in their neighborhood and the sustainability benefits of chickens regarding eggs, fertilizer, and compost. And finally, if you open attachment 7, you can follow along with station 4, where attendees shared their concerns about urban agriculture and what they hoped future regulations will account for. So attendees primarily wanted enforceability, clarity, and protection against noise and pests. It's important to note that in addition to the comments captured on these boards, folks were also encouraged to write more detailed notes on index cards, which they did, and they also brought in printed materials of their own, called, emailed, and mailed comments to us to share their more detailed thoughts. Most of these written comments are provided and accounted for as attachments 2 and 3 of your staff report. However, we did receive an additional 5 emails following the publishing of that report. 3 of those comments indicated interest in being part of the process going forward and supporting urban agriculture and equity considerations, and 2 expressed concern about potential correlation between chickens and pests. So what's next? From here, we plan to write some draft code based on the feedback we received we've received so far, the feedback we received from you guys tonight, and the feedback we plan to receive with partner agencies that we have just started contacting, like the USDA, University of Oregon, Tualatin River Keepers, and the Tualatin Water and Soil Conservation District. So all of these partner agencies are interested in providing us some feedback on the how, why, and all of that of some of these different regulations that we've seen other cities adopt. So we recommend that we build regulations based on these conversations and research, and that these regulations, it looks like we're looking at regulations that will limit the number of animals based on lot size and square footage per animal. We also recommend considering permit requirements potentially for larger numbers of animals on larger lots to demonstrate that these property owners have the education and capacity for larger numbers. We'll also recommend probably prohibiting outright louder or aggressive animals like roosters or geese. Everybody seems to be pretty much on the same page about those animals. And we also anticipate that this code will focus heavily on screening and storage requirements and clear enforceable standards. Following this draft code writing, we'll have another community event in September to introduce the draft code to the community and get more feedback. And then we'll return again to the Planning Commission and City Council in October for adoption of these standards. And then we'll move on to the next phase of home in fall of this year. That's it for my presentation tonight. Tom and I are here to answer any questions you might have. And again, we're not requesting a formal vote on anything tonight, but we are interested in getting your feedback as we get started on writing some code. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the presentation. Commissioner K7, I saw your hand go up.
Yes. Hi, Hope. Oh, you can't even see me. Sorry. I thought you could. There you go. Very nice presentation. I actually really liked your idea of having that community environment where you had 4 stations. People could go say what they wanted to say. That's a very cool idea. Very happy to see that you did that. Yeah, I had a few clarifying questions. So, for example, you showed the chart of what Portland allows and other cities allow. For example, in Portland, in the first row, there were chickens, rabbits, and something else, right? So when they say 4, if it's a medium size, is it 4 of each, or it's just 4 total? What does that really mean when they say 4 animals allowed?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Different cities regulated things a little bit differently, but I believe Portland, it was 1 of each was allowed.
I see. Okay. Thank you. And then along those lines, I did see in one of the attachments there was a report about some of the health concerns from Eugene, but not from some of the more populous places like Portland. Is there value in collecting that information from Portland? Have they done the study in Portland also? Because they've allowed a lot more liberally some of the livestock. So is there a more detailed, more up-to-date numbers from Portland that we can get?
That's a great idea. Yeah, I will reach out to Portland staff and get an idea of their nuisance code violations. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Or their code violations.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Watson.
Hello. Thanks again for the great presentation. It's good to hear that there's a conversation going on about this issue. I'm wondering if there has been consideration of permaculture and other types, or that sort of sort of alternative styles of livestock, chicken tractors, and that sort of thing, which would apply mostly to larger lots, of course. But PCC, I'm sort of just suggesting that PCC has a very active and strong permaculture program, and so they may be a potential source of collaboration on encouraging permaculture practices that are sustainable and healthy for the environment, with providing that kind of raising and anyway, it's a different way of thinking about it as opposed to your conventional wisdom on raising chickens and on your property like that. Okay.
Thank you. We'll add them to our list of partner agencies to talk to.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any other questions at the moment. I do have two quick questions. I think one is pretty much the same question that Commissioner K7 had. I was just curious. My assumption would be that if there were a permitting process, kind of the fees associated with that would mostly be for the sake of covering any cost to the city for enforcing like the marginal amount of nuisance complaints from small family farms. And so I was curious also about kind of if we could figure out data-wise what the marginal increase in nuisance complaints might be from this sort of activity, just as a way of, if we were doing a permitting process, a way to keep that at kind of the minimum it needed to be as far as fees. My other question was more if we knew anything about kind of the history of why some of these regulations were omitted originally from the code. I know originally that Tigard was more of a kind of a bedroom suburban community, and maybe that just wasn't on the radar, but I didn't know what we knew of that history.
Thank you. Yeah, I will definitely look into nuisance complaints associated with the regulations in different cities and what that might be like, yeah, in relation to a potential permit fee associated with urban ag. And then why we originally, I know Tom might have a little bit more insight into this, but I believe we had like one limitation on chickens a while back, and that was to keep them like 100 feet from any adjacent building. And I think it was just really difficult to enforce because then someone could build a building closer and then you have to move the coop. And it was just, I don't think we had enough complaints to warrant the code at that time. And now we need a code that is more explicit while still being easier and simpler to enforce than that old 100-foot to a structure rule. So that's why we're here today.
Yes, I think so. What I would add to that history, I don't know the legislative history that was before my time. When I arrived here in 2011, we did have the 100-foot from property lines for the coop, for chickens. There were a few other things. It was kind of scattered around the code. It wasn't comprehensive. I think that's because, as you said, it was kind of a bedroom, suburban, traditional community, and these types of things didn't really come up at that time. And then when some issues did start to come up, the deficiencies in our code started to show rapidly, and part of it was, as I recall, there were some areas of the code that the city attorney was concerned about with enforcement interpretation, and so that's why the city council decided to essentially remove those limitations, those limited limitations from the code, and proceed to enforce controls on urban agriculture through the nuisance code primarily.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for staff before we move on to the public comment? Commissioners? I see none. So Keelan, I believe I'm addressing you. Do we still have our public commenter or multiple public commenters on the line?
Yes, we have one caller at this time. I'm passing it through now.
Thanks.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hello caller. Please go ahead with your testimony.
Okay, my name is Roger Potoff, and I reside along with my wife, at 11710 Southwest Ann Street in the LaRon Heights subdivision. And I had earlier today, but late this afternoon, sent to Hope and to Tom and to the city council various attachments, that is, documents that are relevant to the decisions and policy changes, if any, that you're considering. And one of those documents is a model township zoning ordinance, further titled The Raising and Keeping of Chickens. And this document is, again, just like in building codes and electrical codes, there are model codes, and this is one of those codes. And this information was sent to me by Dr. Terry Mesmer, who at Utah State is a professor of wildland resources and director of Utah's community-based extension program, and a very credible source. He's been doing this a long time, and he sent this to me as he is very aware of the proliferation, the increase in interest, et cetera, with respect to urban agriculture. He's not an opponent of it, but he believes that it's critical for the public health and safety that this be dealt with in a very prudent manner. And one of his main focuses is on the connection between rodents, i.e. rats, and chickens. And in fact, one of the documents that's included that I believe Hope will share with you is a document from the World Small Animal Veterinary Association, very credible journal, professional journal, and it's titled, "Do Backyard Chickens Pose Any Health Risks to Humans?" And this document was created, authored by a disease that is a Center for Disease Control and Prevention for the United States in Atlanta, Georgia. The scientist's name is Casey Barton Baharavesh, who is a veterinarian and also a PhD in regard to veterinary science. And I will leave it for you folks to read this. It's a short article, but it certainly is on point, because as much as we want to think about this issue of urban agriculture as a bucolic activity with all of the benefits that come from what we respect in regard to country living and a simplified lifestyle in these complex and stressful times, we also have to understand that the intentions to embrace that lifestyle and share that with the neighbors is one thing, and the actualization of what those intentions look like is quite another. And Dr. Messmer speaks very directly and candidly about that in another article that I've included that he's quoted extensively in. And this article is entitled, "Is there a correlation between rodents and backyard chickens?" And again, I refer you to that reading. These are, and this article, Julian Reese, well, I'll leave it that the contact for the article was Dr. Messmer at Utah State. He's a very accessible individual, and so if any of you have questions about anything that you present, this isn't a cherry-picked expert by any stretch. And neither I nor my attorney or any neighbor, he is doing this voluntarily based upon information that I have shared with him and photos of what I live next door to. And it's quite a concern. Some of you may be aware of it. And as we go through this whole regulatory process, I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to know what the facts are here on Ann Street. I just want to share one other thing with you, and that is an article out of the LA Times. And this article is dated January, this may be the day, yes, this article is dated February 17th of 2019. It's very brief, if you would allow me to read it. I didn't include this as an attachment, but it's very brief. May I read it?
Commissioners, is there any objection to having the caller read the article?
It's very short.
No
I see.
objection for me.
Nope.
Okay, Commissioner Miranda, I
Okay,
see
well,
a question for later, correct?
may I begin?
No, I was actually curious about our timing protocols. If it was
Sure,
if
sure.
it was just unlimited, Commissioner Vice President Jackson. That was all.
I'm actually not sure what the protocol is for public comment during a briefing because we don't usually have those.
Okay.
Yeah, hello, excuse us just for a second, Mr. Potoff. We just have to
No,
sort out
that's fine.
the point of our.
That's right. We're just trying to find a solution here, and I will accommodate that as you have been accommodating to me. Thank you. I'll just stand by.
Okay, so yes, normally when we have public comment, it's for a quasi-judicial land use case, and those are limited to 3 minutes. This is a legislative project. This is a briefing, so you as a commission can decide how much, if any, community input you want at this point, and how much time you want to allow those who would like to provide the input. So yeah, it's because it's legislative, you have a lot of leeway.
Understand. Thank you. I have no question for later, and have received the items the caller has mentioned. Thank you.
May I read this article, or you simply want me to email it as an additional, transmission with what I've already provided? I'm happy to do that. I trust you folks will read it, and you know how to read as well as I do. So whatever works for you guys is going to be good for the community, I'm sure.
Yeah, we already have the other materials that you emailed, and I'm sure we will be reading those before we make any decisions coming later in the year. So if you could perhaps forward that on to us, that would be great. But if you have any kind of commentary on that article right now, we'd be happy to hear that.
Yeah, well, I would say that the commentary on the article that I did not include in the transmission, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, but I don't think there was enough time for you to read that. But the comment that I would have here on this LA Times article, because it is relatively current, although much of what I have submitted, I don't think there's anything there that's submitted that has a date earlier or further back than 2018. This article from the LA Times is dated February of 2019, and it relates to an investigation into the vermin infestation at City Hall, actually, in Los Angeles, and where one employee was diagnosed with typhus, a disease spread by rodents. And without going through all of this in regard to reading the thing, there were 13 people in California who were diagnosed with typhus in 2008, compared with 167 in 2018. And again, skipping ahead, the point here is that among the 19 people who have been infected as part of the typhus outbreak in downtown Los Angeles, this being February 2019, 8 were homeless. So 8 of the 19 were homeless, and we know the kinds of conditions that those people are suffering with. But 11 of the 19 were not homeless. And I doubt they lived I don't know where they live in Los Angeles, but my point is that rats and the diseases that they spread, along with well, I'll leave you to those other articles. They know no boundaries. They know no boundaries in terms of economic class. They know no boundaries in terms of racial privilege. And we need to be careful. We need to be very careful. If we've learned anything from COVID, we've learned that animal-borne illnesses are a huge threat to the human population at some point where that transmission makes that shift. And rodents are one of the key transmitters. So as you consider what we're talking about in terms of urban farming and livestock, please bear in mind that this is a urban, suburban community. And we're under a mandate from the state to increase the density under the urban growth boundary. And within a long walk from Ann Street, there's Roy Rogers Road, and on the other side of Roy Rogers Road is a rural, is on the other side of the urban growth boundary. It's the rural side. Boundaries come with two sides. That's implicit in the definition of it. One side is looking to preserve the bucolic lifestyle and give all of those things. And I believe that urban agriculture has a place in Tigard. I just think we have to be very careful about how we approach the regulation of this, and we have to view it clearly as a public health and safety issue as much as a philosophical and lifestyle issue. And I really appreciate the time that you've given me this evening, and I appreciate the work that you do, and I appreciate the hard work that the staff does every day. And, you know, they're dealing with difficult issues, and they're dealing with people who feel passionately about them. And I'm one of those people, and they're doing a good job. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate living in Tigard. It's a place of where I can come home from all of these other stresses, and I can feel that I can take some comfort here. This is the shelter from the storm for me, my home. And that's the way I think a lot of people feel about Tigard, and we want to preserve that. Thanks again.
Thank you for your comments. Before you go, do any other commissioners have any questions for the caller? I see none. So thank you very much for calling in. Keelan, do we have any other callers?
We have a second caller, and I will pass them in now.
Hello, caller. Please,
Yes.
please identify yourself, and then you can go ahead and begin your testimony.
My name is Paul Snow. I live at 11870 Southwest Lynn Street, maybe a straight line block away from the residence that the last gentleman was talking about. And the neighbors across the street from us, they just moved, but they had 6 chickens, and I don't have a problem with the chickens. 6 chickens, 3 or 6, no roosters. But with the other gentleman, I'm continually poisoning rats. And my other point is, why are we fixated on the city of Portland? I haven't heard anything about Tualatin, Lake Oswego, Beaverton, Hillsborough, what their rules are. Because I can't believe what the lady said, that city of Portland, you can have all these goats and chickens and animals. 3 to 6 chickens and no roosters, and there's always going to be a rat problem. If you got feed for animals, you're going to have rats. And if you drive by this residence in question on a warm day with your air conditioning on, you smell barnyard, and that's fine. I grew up on a farm, but out in the country, not the city limits. And so that's the only comments I have. I'd just like to hear the regulations on other cities besides Portland.
Okay, thank you. I think that once we finish when we finish with callers, I think the staff can possibly comment on that a little bit. Before you go, do any commissioners have any questions for the caller? I see none. So thank you again very much for your testimony as well.
Thank you.
And Keelan, any additional callers?
No additional callers.
Okay, thank you. well, we're not making any decisions tonight, but I would like to give staff the opportunity to respond to anything they heard that they would like to respond to.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to clarify that we did look at more than Portland for other cities, as shown in that attachment 4 that I referenced in the presentation. We looked at Portland, Eugene, Beaverton, Salem, Gresham, Hillsborough, and Springfield. And these were all the regulations from these various cities were presented at the June 29th event. Yes, so I just wanted to clarify that. Portland just happened to be one of the regulations that folks interacted the most positively with at the event. Thank you.
Thanks. Tom, did you have anything?
No, I don't think so. I think covered that well. Yeah, I maybe the previous caller did not hear the early part of the presentation, but yes, we have been looking at other regulations and we will continue to look at other city regulations.
Okay, so any final questions from commissioners to staff? Looks like Commissioner Roberts raised your hand.
Yes, thanks. We're looking at the regulations, but those are the result of decisions that should be based on some basic facts. And I'm wondering if the Oregon Health Authority, or whether it be at the state or the county or whatever level, has any data that can help us frame it and just understand the detail, like how many cases are there really of this? And, you know, it's, you know, the typhus thing, typhus is spread by the fleas who light on the rats, right? So if you, there's epidemiology in there, and I think it's an important topic because we are encroaching continually on wilder lands, right? There've been cougars spotted by Mary Woodward a few years ago. There were black bears on Bull Mountain. As I was driving down 114th today, an eagle flew right over my car. I mean, like 20 feet up. I was amazed. So we're pushing the boundaries of wildlife. They respond by living with us or by being pushed out. So I'm just thinking, maybe something from the health department, and there may be another organization, wildlife type organization, that might also have some information. Not asking him to do more work, but I can't imagine it's something they haven't already looked at. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we adding Oregon Health Authority or health organization to our list of partner agencies for the next phase is definitely a good point. So we'll look into that.
Thank you.
I believe Commissioner Watson's hand was the next I saw.
Hi. I live in the part of Tigard where near the boundary between Tigard and Washington County. So the lots in my neighborhood are Metzger neighborhood are fairly large. I mean, you know, not huge, but you know, 1/3 acre, 1/2 acre, 1/4 acre, depending. So there's sporadically, like, it's kind of random. It's like there's, you know, in Tigard, obviously we don't have chickens and we don't have anything like livestock. But then, you know, the next house over, which happens to be in Washington County, is, you know, they do have chickens. And I have, you know, there's a neighbor who lives in a couple of blocks from me who has chickens that he lets eat the bugs off of his lawn and wander around in the street a little bit. So you know, in my world, there's regularly, you know, there's a number of my further away neighbors that have chickens. And so, you know, that's another, you know, it's like anecdotally, you know, how are things in Washington County, and do people have issue with that? And you know, and that said, there, you know, there are and I'm not trying to shoot down anybody's concerns. I mean, they're important and serious concerns with health and rodents, and you know, we don't want animal abuse. We don't, you know, we want the animals to be living in the right conditions. And but yeah, there are rodents. There are also rodents without chickens, you know, moles and other rodents that are living on, you know, that are on the property. Crows, crows like to eat them and drop their remains on in my yard for some reason. It, you know, it is like, to John's point, there is wildlife, you know, that we are, you know, that we are living with and pushing out. And you know, again, my interests in permaculture is, you know, it's about kind of living more harmoniously with animals and foods, you know, and sources of food, and how can you raise them in a way that's healthy for not only yourself, the animals, and the environment. And it is about you know, having your livestock be essentially a part of the ecosystem in a constructive way, rather than you know, industrial farming and you know, the health issues that come with raising the animals in unhealthy conditions. So sorry for the rambling, but it's an interesting topic where you know, it's like the aspect of training that is being proposed or examined in this is, you know, that there's a lot of ways that you can, or you know, there's more evolved ways of looking at how you can do you can do this and live with livestock and in a way that's healthy. And you know, also, I just want to bring up bring up the issue of you know, people being able to be self-sustaining, to feed their families with you know, through their farming their property, or you know, having their own animals in that way. It, you know, it is something that's not necessarily just a hobby. You know, it's not about just, you know, having something to entertain the kids. It can help families sustain their lifestyles and you know, feed themselves essentially. So I'll stop rambling now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Miranda.
I think that I'm actually going to kind of continue on the ramble in support of, or anecdotally to what Commissioner Johnson and Watson said. I come from an HOA background, and so my curiosity would be, and my assumption would be, that HOAs within Tigard rules would be forward to any guidelines for Tigard if HOA were to choose to disallow all livestock, that would be the rule. And that I wanted to kind of support both concepts of food security and low impact, greener lifestyles. You know, you can have your goat mow your lawn instead of your gas powered mower. That there's some real kind of symbiosis with having animals as a part of your lifestyle. So that permaculture piece is something that I am curious about as well, and that yeah, the rats don't definitely don't have to have have wild animals or tame animals to bring rodents around. I mean, definitely with the change in the disruption of 217, a variety of wildlife has come down my street, big and small. And so there's a lot of different rodents and mammals and birds out there that we want to foster here in town. And I'm a little concerned that the genesis of this conversation is about rats. I'm absolutely going to read it, and I'm nervous about rats too. But I definitely think that there's a bigger picture out there, and I think that we can come up with regulations that or guidelines that will serve all. And my last kind of ramble is how are we going to monitor? Are we going to like license goats? Are we going to have like a livestock enforcement officer for Tigard? Is this a revenue generating source? Definitely kind of curious there. And so I'd like to see how other communities, right-sized communities, respond as well. Because definitely my experience in HOAs, the reasoning behind not having about status and an impression, and it's not very. There's my rambles. Thank you.
Thank you. I did want to answer your question of how we will monitor, bring them up to code, help them get up to code. And going forward, there's the possibility of requiring a permit, at least for, but yeah, that's not set just yet. And I did want to just address, since both Commissioner Watson and Commissioner Miranda, you that everybody is, safe and healthy. So maybe some of that can be addressed through an educational requirement or educational component going forward.
They're bringing their resources together for food security and, but also for education and for, and maybe happens to live next to your chicken coop. If you have a larger plot of land that could be shared in some manner, could take advantage of the idea of, shared facilities. And
thank you, Commissioner
I
Miranda.
third the bees.
Oh. Alrighty. Bees. Is it still just a nuisance, or does that become something else, or a different level of nuisance?
The actual specifics of our existing code, I'm not sure if we currently have a way that we elevate them, but we could also look at a way to elevate those concerns, since they could be more lethal than other allergens.
I'm not seeing any more. I guess I'll ask staff, are there any areas that we haven't even touched on that you were hoping to?
Let me see. Taking a look at some of the graphs that I put together. I don't think so. I guess if our recommendation for now, which is to just work with partner agencies on the what and why of some of these regulations, and no max after 20K, but some cities limit it to 6, even in a larger lot. If you guys have a strong feeling one way or the other already, I'd be interested to just do a little bit more research with the experts on the why before we get to those specifics.
So what I would add is in the weeks to come, or as you look at information that either the public sends or you do your own research, improvements and additions and refinements to all of this. So there will be other opportunities to get even more fine-tuned with our regulation. Good evening again. I don't have much, just you got the latest of the rolling calendar, so we're going to bounce back and forth between legislative, quasi-judicial again. I don't know, and some of the folks who've relatively new and maybe haven't gone through this, we at the city, we do provide, we pay the fees for these trainings, and these are a service that the city provides to our planning commission volunteers. So I think that's all I have for tonight.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to add, or I would just like to thank. So any other additional business from anyone? Hearing no indication of further business, the meeting is adjourned.